thank you to Chef for their generous donation as a YouTube member. Hello everyone, my name is Vivian and welcome to Following the Plot, a very irregular podcast, unfortunately, but it's about telling stories and about stories in general, and today it is a book review day, the long-awaited review of the Communist Manifesto. Oh boy. So yeah, this is going to be an unedited fucking review of a book that is nonfiction. This is going to be the first example of how different this podcast is going to be from itself, but it still is a story. It's still a book, and I'm going to do my best to keep this within the new parameters of 30 minutes to an hour. Let's see how that goes. And this is also a very rare video version because I just recorded the top and 5 bottom of 2021 episode. And I literally stopped recording, texted someone, and now I'm doing this. So this is going to be a little more chill. Thank goodness. Anyway, so this is my review of the Communist Manifesto. I announced a while ago. When was that? I got my my thing pulled up here. When the fuck did I say I was going to do this? Oh, it was a while ago, I see. A while ago. Oh, boy. And it took me a long fucking time to do it. There it is. August. Oh, fuck me. August 2021. Oh, fuck me. And I think the biggest reason why I got stuck was because one of my biggest complaints about this book, as you can see, it's a fucking thin-ass book. It is it's a pamphlet, essentially. And the biggest problem I had is that it has, like, let me pull it up here. It is, got to include that page. That much of this book is forwards. This is about the book. Stuff that, in hindsight, is way more interesting after you've actually read this shit. So that's that. And then, there it is. That's the actual fucking Communist Manifesto. That's it. This little shit here. And then this is all the appendices. So, when you fucking really crack it down here we go. The bulk of the book, it's kind of hard to tell because I feathered the shit out, but the bulk of the book, while it is the Communist Manifesto for the bulk of it, it is almost tied with the fucking introduction, and there's still a hefty chunk of shit afterwards. Now, as someone pointed out to me, it is valuable to hear about the circumstances surrounding the writing of this book. Thing is, right, if you don't like the book, you're not going to give a shit about the circumstances. Now, I did enjoy reading this, for the record. As soon as I decided I didn't have to read the introductions. I still haven't read the introductions because, as far as I'm concerned, that's basically extra. You know, am I bleeding? No, I'm good. Sorry, I bit my lip earlier and now it kind of tastes different. But it's extra. It's reading about the book. And I do that from time to time. I like to read up about books I've been reading. I've also been reading, now that I've discovered my local library in the past few months, I've been reading books from my childhood, new books that look interesting. I'm finally going to be able to finish the Bone series. It's a graphic novel series. I only got to see like 2 books of which when I was younger, and so I'm really excited to read those. So yeah, I'm just fucking stoked. But also Kingdom Hearts has a fucking, almost said visual novel, for fuck's sake, a graphic novel. I didn't know that. Apparently it was common knowledge, but I didn't know. But anyway, so yeah, starting off with a complaint about this book, It is majority other shit. And that's fine. You know, it's an old fucking book. It said right on the back here, the Communist Manifesto was written in 1848. All right, so that's going on 180 years ago. And that's a lot of time. It's a long fucking time to really qualify what you've been saying. You know, language changes, what things mean change, cultural, and at the time, what would be considered modern day references are not modern day anymore. Need to take a drink. Not a sponsor, but I fucking love this shit. It's called Clear American. It's a ripoff of Clearly Canadian, but it's a 0 calorie, 0 sugar, 0 caffeine, and 0 sodium per serving. It's water. It's no juice. It's carbonated. And it's what helped my mother try to get away from soda when she was. I don't know if she still drinks soda to this day, but I knew for a time she was drinking like a fuck ton of soda. And these really they satisfy that itch because they're carbonated and they have the flavors. I don't drink soda anymore at all, and Bree was addicted to it, and she's still struggling with it. But these have really helped. Specifically, she likes the black cherry. My favorite was white grape, but they seem to have gotten rid of it. At least I can't find it. But she likes the black cherry because her go-to soda is a Dr. Pepper. She had a big moment for that. I know this is a side route, sorry. But she had a big moment of that yesterday. To celebrate her last day of a class, we went to Wendy's. You know, not great for the diet, not great for the money, but we got her a soda, and she took a drink. She took another drink. She's like, I don't want this. It was Dr. Pepper. It was the drink that she really likes, but she didn't want it. And it's fucking great. It's so fucking great. I'm so proud of her. But anyway, so we're talking about the Communist Manifesto. Communist Manifesto. Good Lord. Apart from the complaint of it being mostly things that aren't the Communist Manifesto, when you actually get into it, I have another complaint here. Starting off with complaints, but Lord, this is not just a fucking shitting on the Communist Manifesto. This, I don't know if it's just his writing style or whatever, but the Communist Manifesto tends to come across very defensively. And it makes sense. Even to this day, communist is just a label that gets thrown erroneously to at any dissenting opinion, pretty much. You just like, oh, hey, I don't like that we're not taxing the rich as much. Communist! Fucking whatever. And for a large part of the last few hundred years, communists were treated like fucking supervillains, like spies, like a plague that had to be eradicated. You know, it was fucking literally the first page of the actual Communist Manifesto. Let me get here. Is describing how people fucking talk about it. It's referred to as a specter that's haunting Europe, the specter of communism. And it's just fucking, it's just true. They have reason to be defensive, but I felt like during certain portions of this, of the manifesto, the actual manifesto, it's split into 4 sections. Let me pull up this here. The Communist Manifesto itself is split into the 4 sections. One where they spend time defining the relationship between the bourgeoisie and the proletariats. What? Hey, that's so fucking awesome. Just got news that a friend of mine passed stuff of their class. That's personal details. I don't know if they want that discussed, but good job to them. They passed the class, and that class was the only thing between them and getting a master's degree. So that's fucking awesome. I hope we can go down there for the graduation. I really need to stop talking about people's personal lives. All right, Communist Manifesto. Split into 4 categories. First one is describing the eternal relationship between the bourgeoisie and the proletariats, or the proletarians. The second one is the proletarians and the communists. This one, that section I feel like did the most to actually explain what the fuck. And then the third one is entirely devoted to shitting on other kinds of socialists. Specifically reactionary socialism, conservative and bourgeois socialism, critical utopian socialism and communism. They go through a few different kinds. And then the fourth section is called Position of the Communists in Relation to the Various Existing Opposition Parties. And that phrasing specifically really summarizes what I feel the biggest problem with this is that they spend so much time talking about what they're not doing and addressing criticism sometimes in literal first person. There were a few times where they were addressing the reader and complaints that the reader was lobbying at communism. And, I wasn't making these complaints, but I was reading, oh, you think this? What the fuck's wrong with you? Like, whoa. And okay, and that's actually something I'd want to bring up before I forget, is that there were times where I was reading this, and despite the fact that I am not at all patriotic to America, I have very significant gripes, and I genuinely believe that our current governmental system is beyond fixing from within. I genuinely believe we need to start anew. That being said, there were still some times where I was reading this and I was like, you can't do that. That's just... And it was so fucking weird. It was the weirdest shit. Specifically, the biggest thing that gets to me about the communist philosophy is the relationship to property and state ownership of the workforce. I bookmarked it specifically. There is a page... Excuse me. There is a page in section 2 where they literally list out 10 facets of communist belief. They do qualify it by saying that they'll be different based on different countries, which is interesting because one of them is the dissolution of border, like distinction between countries, but it does own up to the fact that people in different regions will have different interpretations and different ways of going about these different things. And that it says right before it, nevertheless, in the most advanced countries, the following will be pretty much generally applicable. So this is kind of this is what we're aiming at. This isn't like religious dogma where you have to follow it word by word. This is like what we're kind of going for. These are the 10 general tenets of the communist belief, specifically the Marxist communist, because there's a billion fucking different interpretations here. Number 1, the abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Starting right off the bat with a very controversial one. People like owning shit. People like saying, I bought that, it is mine, you can't take it away. In the book, it makes the argument, like... This is another one of my problems with it, was instead of kind of explaining the virtues of a communal property system, it immediately went to, Oh, well, you think that's a problem? Well, here's why I address this specific problem. As opposed to justifying itself with itself, it justifies it in opposition to opposition. It says, I don't have it cited. This is like the one time I wish I had notated a book. I fucking hated notating books. But it mentioned how the vast majority of people don't own shit. And so if you get rid of the ability to own private property, that only affects the people rich enough to be able to do so. And I was thinking about, like, and it even says that it's, God, I wish I had fucking notated it, but okay, here we go. I'm getting to it. Let me bookmark it again. This is why I like podcasts. I can kind of just pause for a second. Yeah, here we go. It is, yeah. Yeah, okay, here we go. You are horrified at our intending to do away with private property, but in your existing society, private property is already done away with for 9/10 of the population. Its existence for the few is solely due to its non-existence in the hands of those 9/10. You reproach us, therefore, with intending to do away with a form of property, the necessary condition for whose existence is the non-existence of any property for the immense majority of society. And I had to think about that. I was like, my thought goes to, my house. I don't own my house. I rent, and this is something that's been pointed out to a lot, is that we actually, when we were trying to buy a house, would have paid very comparable amounts in mortgage payments as opposed to the rent we pay here for a better house. However, even if your house is under a mortgage, you still don't own it yet. You're starting to own it, or you're starting to own it, but you still have to pay off that mortgage. My cars, don't own my cars, still paying those off. At any moment, if I miss that payment, it gets taken away by the actual owner, which is the loan owner. The only things I own are much smaller bits of capital. This microphone, which, while expensive at purchase, as soon as I open the box, it was depreciated significantly. You're talking pure capital value. The amount of things I actually own is quite small. But the people who do own their own houses and own their own cars that aren't, junker cars, and don't have to spend almost as much in gas as you do in maintenance costs, that is a privilege that is only extended by a few people. But as you notice, that the book seems to be addressing the reader specifically. You are horrified at our attending. It doesn't talk about some people who do oppose it. They address you specifically. And that, to me, with the modern lens that I have now, comes across as like a hyper defensive Reddit poster who's like, "Oh, you think I'm lying?" in like the post where literally no one's responded yet. But yeah, they talk about labor. Okay, here we go. In one word, yeah. From the moment when labor can no longer be converted into capital, money, or rent into a social power capable of being monopolized, i.e., from the moment when individual property can no longer be transformed into bourgeois property, into capital, from that moment you say individuality vanishes. You must therefore confess that by individual you mean no other person than the bourgeois, than the middle class owner of property. This person must indeed be swept out of the way and made impossible. Communism deprives no man of the power to appropriate the products of society. All that it does is to deprive him of the power to subjugate the labor of others by means of such appropriation. And then it goes on to talk about labor. That, I feel like, is a distinction that should be gone into more. It's saying, we're not saying you can't own shit. You just can't own shit at the expense of someone else who has to fucking Like it says, to subjugate the labor of others by means of such appropriation. That I feel like needs to be explained more. And I'm sure in the introduction or the appendix, shit, damn it, my bookmark fell out. In the introduction or in the no doubt thousands upon thousands of books talking about the various tenets of Marxist communism apart from the actual Communist Manifesto itself, goes into what the fuck that means. You can own shit, but you can't own it upon the subjugating of labor of others in order to appropriate it. Well, everything has to be made by someone. So can you only have stuff that is made by people who own the means of production? But you have to go into the next one. Okay, not the literal next one, but it's in there. Where it's the means of production are owned by the state. And see, that one's interesting to me because they gave examples of like craftsmen, people who had their own store, who would be talking about, this is an example, not specifically from the book, but like a shoe salesman. Now you think of shoe salesman, you think of Shoe Carnival, Payless, Walmart, places that, you're fairly certain these shoes were made by some fucking slave child in some African or Asian country somewhere that's getting paid $1 a year, and it fucking blows. But in owning the means of production, you'd have something kind of like you had before, where previous examples of owning the means of production yourself was craftsmen. If you had a shoe store, likely you were a cobbler, someone who made the shoes yourselves. You would buy the leather or the materials from, leather workers, and then you would make the shoe yourself, and then you would market it and sell it, and it would be in your possession from literal conception of materials to the sale to someone else. But if we're talking about the subjugating of the labor of others, if that cobbler is working of their own volition, does that count? Or I don't know. I'd have to talk about that more with experts. So, as that is inconclusive, I will move on. The second tenet of the generally pretty much kind of sort of the goal of Marxist communism. Number 2, a heavy progressive and graduated income tax. Now, I agree with this. I believe that billionaires should be illegal and multimillionaires should have to pay their fair share. I'm a big fan of the show West Wing, and they randomly brought in a moment where they made a bullshit fucking argument. They were talking about how one of the characters, Sam Seaborn, was working at an investment firm, and he was making 6 figures, and he was paying 8 times more than people who don't make 6 figures, and he called that his fair share, and that he puts up with it even though he doesn't get 8 more votes than the average person. I'm like, motherfucker, like it wasn't the market that valued that job at that point. It was people who got away with wanting that much money, and then everyone else agreeing they wanted that much money too, so they all conspire to raise wages for that job up to that point. It wasn't the market that decided that. It was a bunch of greedy motherfuckers. And the idea that you should, there's even a consideration that if you pay more money, you should get more of a say in the government. One, we already have that, and it sucks. So no, yeah, I am very much in favor of a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. I think if you barely make anything, you should keep almost all of it, if not all of it. If you make a living wage, I think if you make enough money to just squeak by, you should keep all of your money. We shouldn't be asking shit of you. You're barely making your own ends meet. If you're making more than you need to survive, that's when you just start very smallly, expecting a, contribution towards making the government work and whatever. But when you make way more fucking money than you will ever need, that's when you really need to be pitching in like a majority of what you make. Because at that point, I think like money hoarding should be illegal. Number 3 actually pays into that. Number 3, abolition of all right of inheritance. I'm not sure if I like all right of inheritance because like family heirlooms, like small little shits, I would like to be able to inherit that. But like people who are multi-billionaires who make more money than them or their next 5 generations will ever be able to spend, even if they live a raucous life of spending money constantly. Yeah, you shouldn't just be entitled to that, in my view. And I have no problem with a so-called death tax. Because, fuck me, when capital changes hands, it gets taxed. For a regular person, that's in the form of a sales tax, which I also don't think should be a thing. But that's what we have right now. So if capital changes hands upon you dying, and it's being changed from you to someone else, that should be taxed as well if you want to play fair. Number 4, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. That one is a controversial one. Confiscation of all property of all immigrants and rebels? That one's that's fucked for me. Okay, so I think we should have a gun buyback program. It's worked in other civilized countries, and I think it would help a lot. However, immigrants being lumped in with rebels in terms of people who have no right to property? I think that's fucked. I'm not on board with that. And I can get the logic of like, you don't want people who, they call them rebels here. It's an older term. You're talking about people who are going to do harm. Like, confiscate all their property though? Like, that's a harsh punishment even if you were able to convict them of a crime they actually committed. Yeah, I'm not on board with that. Number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Sorry. So instead of having a bunch of little banks and credit bureaus and all this other stuff, you would have all in the hands of the state. You would owe all your money in terms of credit to the state. Now, there are obvious ways that this can go awry, but there are also benefits in terms of if it's run well. See, the problem with a system that enables the state with so much power is that even if you currently have people that you believe will actually maintain to the spirit of that, as soon as those people are gone, you have no guarantee that the next people will be able to maintain that. So say that you're establishing a national bank and you know that the people establishing it are going to keep interest rates lower than any credit bureau but any credit card company or bank that is currently running would ever have it. I think one of my credit cards is like a 27 or something fucking percent interest. It's fucking ridiculous. So say their interest rate is like 5. Like, that'd be fucking nuts, right? That'd be great. I think interest in and of itself is immoral. Charging interest on credit is immoral in my view. But say that your interest rate is fucking ridiculously low. Well, if the state is in charge of that, there is no check, at least just established, that you could try to implement checks within the state about who could do like interest rate increases. You'd have to do more than just centralize all debt. But obviously debt is a very controversial issue here. Like, we have so much student debt that it's just impossible. It should just be canceled. It's impossible. And also, I also feel that student debt being levied on people trying to do the thing that your economy finds necessary, yeah, that's immoral in my view as well. But yeah, in terms of a national bank, I'm kind of iffy on that. I would need to see a specific proposal on how to do that and how to avoid corruption on that view. But could work. We'll see. People going nuts outside. Or specifically one dog's going nuts outside. And of course, because that dog's going nuts, my dog is like ready to go nuts. I'd really like it to just not be a problem right now, but whatever. Number 6, centralization of the means of communication and transport into the hands of the state. Now, this one's interesting because obviously in 1848, we didn't have Facebook. So they're referring to things like telegraphs and the mail. But now, if you, like, the dog is really distracting. I'm sorry. Centralization of the means of communication. We'll just start with that one. For communication, you wouldn't have Western Union. You just have USPS. Honestly, most people don't trust USPS anymore. And nowadays, the modern interpretation of communication would include social media. And we've seen an example, a fucked up example, and I'm not going to cite fucking China as an example of Marxist communism. No, it's not. But state-run social media in China, for example, is heavily censored and controlled and manipulated, and it's not good. But that's not an example of anything to do with this. I'll recognize that. People who are like, oh, you want communism? We'll go to Venezuela. That's fucking stupid. Modern day fucking Russia or Venezuela, fucking China, any example deviates from what the fuck they're talking about here. That's why that's literally the reason why I wanted to read the fucking manual to see where all these other motherfuckers went wrong. But yeah, centralization of the means of communication, I don't think that could work. I think any system worth its weight can handle criticism being unfettered. But I'm willing to be proven wrong because that is an absolute, and I don't like absolutes. When you say all these or any this is blank, then odds are you've said something that's wrong. But also centralizing the means of transport. Now that's interesting because individual cars, I don't know if that would include that or if they're just talking about like city-owned buses, trains, stuff like that. Because if you're referring to that, then we do have good examples of municipal transport systems. We also have bad examples of it. But if all of them were centralized, then there's a possibility that could be okay. But if it includes like personal cars and shit, like that rubs me the wrong way. Again, here's the thing, right? I'm willing to discuss my view on any of these points with anyone who adequately understands and can speak to a proper interpretation of this, or just generally discuss them in general, even irrespective of the Communist Manifesto itself. Because these are interesting ideas, and I like discussing them. So here I'm saying, just from what I gleaned from reading once a book that was written 180 years ago and could not possibly have known where the hell society is going now. Although weirdly, there were points in this book where I was like, oh fuck, that's just true. Oh, what's next? What's next? Number 7. This is only 10, mind you. Number 7, the extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of soil generally in accordance with a common plan. Quiet, Spoofy. I promise everything's fine out there. This is a lot of things. So let's start with the first one. The extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. That one, just from the wording, seems to not actually do much other than continue. The extension of factories owned by the state. It's just extending what is already owned by the state. It's possible that they are trying to say, like, you would include means of production into ownership of the state. So any factory that isn't owned by the state will be extended into including them into being owned by the state. I'm not, and again, this is very possibly just something based on the fact that I've only ever lived under one governmental system. And this is a government system that I recognize is not working, however, is also very tied with propaganda. America is very much interested in selling itself to its citizens to make sure none of us actually question this shit. That being said, propaganda is a very powerful tool. Even if you question it, you have to recognize its influences. It's like tendrils into various things that you wouldn't think were being affected by it. So it's very possible that when I hear the state owns the means of production, one, to me, that seems like almost a contradiction in terms, because the whole idea, right? They talk about how the proletariats will overthrow the bourgeoisie who already, through their influence the government. And so the whole idea is that the proletariats would seize power, would drain the bourgeoisie of their fucking capital, and not become a political power themselves, but drain the political power of political classes in order so that regular people can be the ones deciding how the government works. So the ideal is that the state represents a will of the regular people, the workers. So when they say the state owns the means of production, they refer to a state of workers owning the means of production. So you wouldn't have one person who owns a factory that is regulated by a government that is run by republics, representatives of people. You would have regular working people owning the factory that they work at via the means of a government that is run by fellow workers of themselves. I have no idea how that works, because it sounds like you're doing 3 jobs, and like that's a lot of work. But like, who knows? It's not been done yet, at least not in the way that I imagine it was envisioned. The second part of that, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands. Now, what they're referring to wastelands of there, I have no idea. But they could be referring to just uncultivated lands, which at that point, you really just have to know what the fuck they're talking about to decide if you agree with them or not, because one interpretation is, developing land that is sort of preserved or is just untouched by modern society, like the tribes in the Amazon that fiercely avoid fucking any interaction with the outside world. I feel like fucking with them is like, just, you don't need to do that. We shouldn't do that. It's a transgression upon people's will. But it also could literally just mean like lands that are deemed too expensive to cultivate, and like too treacherous. Well, like, the reason why we don't have a highway that extends from Africa to the bottom of South America is because in Central America, there is a spot that is deemed so fucking difficult to traverse, too dangerous. There's mosquitoes, there's fucking violence. The terrain is difficult. Come on, stay strong, spoof. Stay strong. You don't have to give in. But it could literally be referring to situations like that, where we would invest in doing that for the betterment of whatever the fuck. I don't know what the fuck it's referring to, so I will move on. And the third part of that section is the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. How fucking non-fucking, what is the word? Non-specific is almost it, but non-committal. There you go. Cultivation of soil in accordance with a common plan. Like, that's having farms as agreed to by a plan we haven't made yet. Like, I don't, it's not, that's a nothing sentence. But, yeah, who knows? Number 8 out of 10, equal liability of all to labor. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Equal liability of all to labor. See, this is the shit that's fucking with me, is this use of all, every, all these things. What I am interpreting that to mean is that everyone is expected to do labor. Not everyone can labor. I can't. People who are in much worse physical or mental conditions to me can't. So is there an exception for them? What about those who, I believe at one point they talked about how you shouldn't have to work to live. Okay. Then where, like, if a person's not bound to labor in order to survive, what is their motivation to labor if their motivation for existence is not tied to labor? Say a person wants to be a surveyor of sites, or a writer of blogs, or an artist or whatever. Are they then required by this equal liability to perform labor that's not respective to their dreams? I don't understand. Again, this would need more of a examination, and if they spent more time actually talking about what they want to do as opposed to addressing what people are saying about what they want to do, I feel like they could get more shit done with these pages. And I have no idea what the hell an industrial army is, especially an agricultural industrial army. I have no idea. You finally did it. Quiet, spoofy. So I'm just going to move on from that, because I have no fucking clue what the hell that means. Industrial army. Maybe someone can explain that to me. Number 9, the combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. Gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. That's fucking controversial as shit. There's a movie on HBO called All the Way, and it's talking about Lyndon Johnson's first year in office and trying to pass the Civil Rights Act. And one of the proposals that was given during congressional debates about the Civil Rights Act was a proposal to equally distribute black people all over the country under the guise of being fair to parts of the country that are more heavily populated by black people, and subjecting the same rules upon those who have less of a black population. And in a fucked up sense, in their fucked up logic, they felt that made sense. Now, that's what comes to my mind when I hear equitable distribution of the population. You're forcing people to move so that you can gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country, they talked about how cities are heavily populated and rural communities are being laid to waste. I I don't understand the benefit of this. It's okay, Spoof. It's okay. Yeah, there's I, Spoofy. Hi, Spoofy. It's okay. It's okay. Everything's fine. I know Star across the street's freaking out about something, but they bark at everything. You don't have to worry about it. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. I don't know why that's necessary. I literally don't understand why you have to do this one. And I understand a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do this one. But I do... There are a number of people that would be willing to move from where they're at. And so maybe just create a voucher program for people who want to move. Like, that could be something. But, like, forcing people to move so that cities become less populated and rural communities have people who are moved there by force, like, that's just going to brew resentment. Plus, you already have infrastructure of cities that will just be laid dormant because they're no longer filled. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I genuinely have no idea why or how you would do that one. And number 10, the last one, free education for all children in public schools. Abolition of children's factory labor in its present form. Combination of education with industrial production, etc., etc. Okay, so this one's interesting because of grammar. Lovely. Obviously, free education for all children in public schools. Totally agree. We kind of have that with public schooling. But this could be... I don't know, I guess the abolition of private schooling? I just wish public schools were better. Teachers should be paid like doctors, if not better than doctors. I don't know. But yeah, I agree with the first part. I also agree with the second part, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form. Yeah, children should not be expected to be working. Yeah, that one's... And if you're going to require kids to go to public school, you should not let them also be expected to work at 16 or during that age. Like, also, like, the idea of public schools being basically training you for the workforce. I mean, that's why we have the school hours that we have now. Like, there are a lot of school models that don't have the school hours we have, the school days we have, the model we have. But they're all programmed to be less beneficial to education and more beneficial to training people to be factory workers. Like, we really need to change that. But here's the question I have here. It says, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, period. Combination of education with industrial programs, etc., etc. Now, that second part is a sentence fragment, and there are a lot of grammatical changes that have happened over the last 180 years, plus Marx wasn't exactly an English teacher himself. However, it could be meaning that they're referring to the abolition of children's factory labor, including the combination of education with industrial production, which I just spoke about. If you're abolishing the inclusion of... if you're abolishing the combination of education with industrial production, wholeheartedly agree. There's no part of education that should be training people to work. Absolutely agree. But since there is that period there, it could be a third proposal in that topic. I have no idea. I don't fucking know. But since they literally just said we shouldn't be having kid workers, it would also be weird then to say that we should combine education with industrial production. So I would deem it fairly reasonable assumption to say that we don't have that. We don't have that as a third proposal out of nowhere. Anyway, so those are the 10 big tenets of Marxist communism as taken explicitly from the original book. Now, mind you, political ideologies change over time, and if Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were alive today and educated in the socio-economic, societal, whatever the hell challenges of a modern day, it's very possible that they would adjust a few things in here. I don't know. All we can do is interpret and try to modernize, which always leads to biases being laid forth and corrupting the original intent. That's why I didn't want to read the added introductions years later. But I probably will now, because I'm actually interested to see what people say, and they give better contexts about them. I was reading an introduction where it felt like they spent fucking 17 years talking about, well, Marx didn't think he was a romantic, but he was. But he didn't think so, but he was. Like, they just fucking talk about it for 5 fucking centuries, and it's like, shut the fuck up about it. I get it. But that it literally could have just felt that way because I just didn't fucking care. But anyway, am I a communist now? No, I don't think I'm a communist. I do think I agree with a lot of these tenets, and I feel like if I got some, I don't know, clarification about what some of them mean, then maybe I'd agree with them more, maybe even less. But when it comes to like central tenets, like the abolition of private property, it could just be because I was raised by a capitalist system, but there's a part of me that has a great ambition to one day own a house, to own my cars, to own the land on which I live. But it's also possible that that's only an ambition that I was trained to have and that I don't genuinely want. It's also possible that, it's not possible. It is true that I deem modern corporate capitalism to be the bane of existence of a lot of the prosperity that we could have as a country. I see a system that benefits those who need no benefit and leaves abandoned those who would need any kind of help. I don't see any government system that can create multi-billionaires but also leave millions left homeless as a success. I see it as a constant failure. And I could go into all of the things I see wrong with our current system, and maybe I will one day. But as for right now, the Communist Manifesto is a book written a long fucking time ago by people who could not have predicted what is coming today. They predict that the very invention and cultivation of the bourgeois class inevitably creates its counterpart, the proletariat, that will rise up and drain them of their power. And I have yet to see that happen. And this has been happening for a long fucking time. And if there is any part of me that it's as close to being a communist as possible, is that I am so fucking ready for a change. There was one thing I wanted to mention real quick before I go. That really did sound like a fucking end here. And it was supposed to be, but then I remembered I wanted to mention something. In the section in which they're talking about different kinds of socialism and why they're not what we're trying to talk about. Again, it felt like a wasted fucking chapter. But one of them kind of fucking hit me as being like, oh shit, I am pretty much this. So in the section in the third chapter, I guess, of the Communist Manifesto, where they talk about conservative or bourgeois socialism. And they describe it as such. A part of the bourgeoisie is desirous of redressing social grievances in order to secure the continued existence of the bourgeois society. To this section belong economists, philanthropists, humanitarians, improvers of the condition of the working class, organizers of charity, members of societies for the prevention of cruelty to animals, temperance fanatics, hole and corner reformers of every imaginable kind. This form of socialism has, moreover, been worked out into complete systems. Basically, they describe these bourgeois socialists as those who, instead of urging for a revolution, believe that we can make good from the system we have now, and will fight fervently to make those changes, but also want to keep the things that got us to this point. And that's one of the big things that stood out to me, is the amount of times where I was like, oh, definitely, I want a lot of this shit to change, and if it takes a revolution to do so, we should. But maybe we keep this part, or we keep that, or whatever. And it's like, if you have a revolution, the idea is what we did led us to this point, and it sucks and needs to change. So why would we keep the shit that got us to this point, right? So I need to definitely reevaluate my views on whether we need a permanent revolution, use that phrase, a permanent revolution, or whether I genuinely believe that there are things that we should keep, because I want to get rid of so many fucking things. So many fucking things I want to get rid of from our current system. But if we keep too many of what got us to this point, change cannot happen, because there's only so many dishes you can make from the same ingredients. So anyway, I think that's basically all I wanted to mention. This isn't a great read. Even when I announced that I wanted to read this book, there were a lot of comments. I can actually say right here. There were comments. My mom saying she's looking forward to my review. She says it's interesting that this book, much like the Bible, was interpreted in so many different ways. Like all the different religions that sprang from the Bible, you see various countries that tried and still use their version of communism. That is true. She also knows that I'm not a religious person. We've talked about that. She is. I'm not. But I respect that she is. And so it's very, very, very enlightened of her to mention that the Bible is interpreted in so many different ways. My shit's kind of in the way of it. Let me move over here. Fuck me. All right. Sorry, I got to resize my my screen so that I can actually see it, because my dumbass put the camera right in front of my screen. Quinn Florence. Let's see. I was checking in on your channel because my older brother was wondering how you were doing. Saw a blue dot. Okay, this is... okay, this is really nothing to do with it. They do mention... not that I halfway into the video, I know you're just looking at the book to understand what the culture of this book is. In that sense, I feel less, oh my god, shocked energy. Okay, that's fine. Okay, here we go. Anime Furry. They'll have to comment. Thank you for the nuanced answers and your dedication to truth over dogma. Much respect. Thank you. They describe themselves as an anarcho-communist, and they wish me the best of luck. They said, forewarning, you're right. The Communist Manifesto is very much of its time and is so modernly outdated, but the communist tradition lives on in others besides Marx. But if you are truly interested in Marx, that is timeless and very modernly relevant, please read Das Kapital. It is way more difficult to read, but is also much more enlightening. Or they said eliminating. And they said, good luck, hopefully future comrade. Also check out anarchist writings as well. Mutual aid is a good start. Maybe those will be future book reviews. That could be good. Oh Lord. Okay, what is this? Quinn Florence. I read these, but this was months ago, so I'm sorry. they said they didn't read the book for these reasons. They said people would call me anti-American, which is true. I was reading this in multiple public places, and every time people would be like, ugh. They say I was pro whatever goes against American. Yeah. They would call you a Russian spy. For context, they're third generation European blood, Texas, America. So people call you a Russian would be idiots, but unrealistic and unreasonable idiots. You get bullied at school if you did it. That sucks. I'm sorry. And it was really an unspoken rule of being American or in the South. You just don't read anything that was devalued the American culture or way of life. So you just never read the book. I was raised in Kansas. I understand that was you even so much like you have to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. If you so much as stutter, you're a fucking communist, and we're gonna beat your fucking head in at recess. Like that was the fucking culture, even in the 2000s. And there are parts of the world still today where that happens. Well, it's parts of the world, parts of America where that still happens. Hell, there are parts of the world where that happens too. But fuck, man. Also, as a kid, you were way into writing your own stories, not having to read. But yeah, that's why you didn't read it. You look forward to my take on the culture of the book, and I mean in the context it was written. Unfortunately, I don't have much of a knowledge of the context in which it was written because I didn't read the forwards or edits. But I do know that 1849 was not the most progressive time in the world. 1848. Who was president in 1848? Well, 1841 was William Henry Harrison. That was followed by 4 years of John Tyler. That would take us to 1845. 4 years after that is James K. Polk. So for context, America was not even... It was before the Civil War, obviously. The point is, it was a lot fucking... It was a very different world than it is today. And that's just in an American sense. Europe, even at the end, they were talking about, like, we're looking towards Germany for the revolution to start, because that's where it feels like it's going to happen the most. And I don't know much about German history before the 20th century, but I do know German history in the 20th century was not one friendly to communism. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end here. We're at an hour. Don't want it to go much longer. As an inflammatory outcry against capitalist exploitation of the working class. We're still dealing with that today. If I were to describe myself, I'm not sure I would call myself a communist full out, but I do know I'm definitely a socialist. Right now, I'm currently I'm currently splitting away from Bernie-cratism because I find myself veering to the left of Bernie Sanders. So I don't know if Democratic Socialist really hits it right now, or if that's close yet. I don't know. But what I do know is I'm doing the Midwest exit where I keep fucking saying I'm leaving. So I'm just going to say right now, I consider myself a Democratic Socialist, but I also consider that I need to reevaluate that in terms of actual political ideology and in terms of all these various things, because I took that political ideology test that gets touted around a lot, and on the grid, I was like barely off of the fucking border of the bottom left. So I was very left, very so I don't know. We'll see. I've got a lot of thinking to do. Thank y'all very much for listening. If you've reached the end of the this video, tell me your theory as to why Karl Marx's mustache is a different color than his beard and hair. Is it just because that kind of happens to mustaches sometimes? Because, it interacts with your mouth more. Does he dye his mustache? Is he Mario? You ever noticed how Mario's mustache is not the same color as his hair? It's true. His mustache is black, but his hair is brown. I don't know. Thank y'all for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Who knows what my next book review will be? It could be the Bone series. It could be the Kingdom Hearts graphic novel series. It could also be one of the books I was recommended here, either Mutual Aid or Das Kapital. I'm not fucking reading Hitler's book. That's just not fucking happening. Jesus. Thank y'all for watching. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a nice day.